I'll tell you exactly how it had started. Monsignor Rodriguez was very involved in the upkeep of the mission and so forth, and we had a few $100,000 in the Fiesta Rodeo treasury, and we were chomping on the bit to get something done. And one day, Monsignor Rodriguez called me up and he says, "I want to see you. Can you come up to my office?" I said, "Sure." So I didn't know what he was talking about. He came up, he says, "We're going to restore the mission." He said, "I've been talking to the bishop about it." He says, "You guys got that money?" And he says, "We're going to try to get some money from some other grants," he says, "and it's time to get it done." The mission itself, you know, it was badly harmed in the 1906 earthquake, and many people think that the mission shook down. The mission did not shake down. What happened was that it had been a real wet winter, and the earthquake in April was naturally the biggest one that had been around here in years. And the outer walls on one side of on the north side of the mission, next to the cemetery, and to a certain degree the wall on the south side, the walls sloughed down. But just behind, on this, it would be the south side of the mission, the wall, part of the wall hadn't sloughed off or collapsed during the earthquake, and it was all open. There was redwood timbers holding up the roof. Pretty high timbers, probably, I guess maybe 30 feet high, and with X braces on them. And then up toward the front there was a concrete wall by the open part of the mission where the one arch was open. There was a concrete wall there, and that door there went into the mission garden, and that's how the local people got into the mission, through that side door. And it had opened up. You walked in, you come in right where the side altar is now on the left side. So there was just a little short room there where you came in, and you had the side altar there, and then to get into the main church, you had to go through the front arch, open arch, to get into the main part of the church. The church had the arches filled in because of an earthquake right after it was completed, and they filled up the arches with adobe brick to keep them from collapsing. Now the arches, of course, were being made out of burnt tile. They were actually a masonry, but they filled it up with just plain adobe brick, filled the arches up, except for the front two arches where they left them open so that the actual church in the front part was in the shape of a crucifix, because the open arches made the arms of the cross. Now the interior of the church, as you walked in, you had just the one main aisle that you see now where the main pews are, and everything else was closed off all the way up to the front, except it was open to the baptismal font was open, and then there was the back part of the church to go up to the choir loft was open. You could, in the last arch, there was a way to get into there, and that's where the old confessionals were in those days. And there was a stairway up to the choir loft. Well, in about 1908, they held a couple celebrations here to raise money for restoration, and that particular group of people, and there weren't only the Catholic people, it was all the people from the community, got together, and they had celebrations for about 3 years here, and to get some restoration work started. And incidentally, that particular group started here. They had horse shows and the small horse show scale. That was where the Salinas Rodeo started. The California Rodeo in Salinas started in San Juan. And after those 3 years here, the population was real small, and they moved on to Salinas, where there was more people, and that was the start of the California Rodeo. Getting back to those arches, after the earthquake, and I mentioned it earlier, 1923, about they reinforced those closed-in arches with concrete, reinforced concrete, and that they made that the present arch opening that where the altar is, the huge arch, that's a concrete arch that was made in 1923. Now that's still there. It was made of reinforced concrete. About 1926, everything stopped, and the Maryknoll priests were then assigned to the mission. The mission was in hard times. They didn't have money to finish restoration, and the Maryknoll fathers were assigned the duty of being the pastors here at this mission. And the first Maryknoll priest was Father Hugh Lavery. He was only here for a year, and he was followed by Father Francis J. Caffrey, and he was the man that saved the mission. During all this too, there was the San Juan pageant started up, and that was during the Depression. It was started in '29, and that was done for the sole purpose of raising money to restore the mission. And in those days, money was real tight, but there was quite a few $1,000s raised. We had parades here. We had the governors of California that led the parades, and on and on. And there was a huge cooking crew here. The barbecue pits were built at that time in the late 20s, and in those days it was a steak barbecue. And my mother was one of the bean cooks, and my dad was one of the barbecuers, and I was one of the pesky kids around getting in the way. But that went on through up till the start of World War II, when it was stopped for 3 years during the war, 3 or 4 years. Then after the war, we started up what we call the San Juan Fiesta Rodeo, and we had 38 Fiesta Rodeos, and I was one of the founders of that, and ended up being the chairman the last 25 years of it. But that group of people, and it was all denominations, not only the Catholics, everybody helped. Masons helped, the Japanese people, there's a large Japanese community here in San Juan, they helped, and everybody helped. And we raised $750,000 for mission restoration, starting with the first one was in 1947, and the last one was in 1983. For obvious problems, deteriorating grandstands and this and that, we stopped it. But it's my feeling that Fiesta, it hadn't been for that Fiesta Rodeo, this mission wouldn't be standing as it is. In '76 and '77, they decided to open up the arches and strengthen them and restore the mission to its original 3 aisles. It's the only mission built with 3 aisles, and it is the largest of the missions. And of course, that was a goal of our Fiesta Rodeo committee, and everybody else who was involved, was to restore the mission to its original formation. But anyway, they started tearing down these concrete walls, and when they got the concrete off, they found that the adobe brick that had been filled in the arches wasn't holding up anything. There was a gap about that big on the top of the arch. So way back in those years, it had shrunk down or whatever, and it wasn't holding up anything. The arches had still supported themselves, really, and they are now. The concrete was taken off. Now what they did is they pumped epoxy into those the tile and mortar, and strengthened it, and that took, I don't know, about, they pumped in there, they worked on those for about 2 months doing that, and then of course they rebuilt the outer wall, and now it's back to its original formation. They were all made down on the Rodeo ground. The adobe came from the back end of, I still call it the Rodeo ground. It's the 10-acre field down where the old pear tree is. But they weren't made with bare feet this time. There was modern methods, concrete mixers, and mixed the mud, and they had forms, and laid the brick. They were dried in the sun though, and then after they dried, they turned them. They had so many days in the sun. See, initially, as I understood it, and it's still there, the bottom third or bottom fourth of the campanile has always been there. You'll see old pictures of the mission, and supposedly when the earthquake of 1812 hit, they stopped construction of the tower, and they just finished it off the way it was, and it always looked different because it went up so high, and then the wall got thinner above it. And it's still there on the present one. You can see it, and I can show it to you. It's still there, and Harry says, well, this was Harry's the one that designed that. He says, this is the way the plan was, that they were going to build it when the earthquake hit, and then they stopped it. And that's what they did. He took me out there and took a group of us out there, and he said, see, that's where it stopped in the earthquake, right there. And he says, and that's where we're going to continue on. So that's all I can tell you is what Harry told me.